Perhaps no other video game in history has had the enduring legacy and relevance that Tetris has. Likewise, no other game has such a unique and crazy story. Initially conceived by Russian programmer Alexey Pajitnov in 1984, during his time at the Soviet Academy of Sciences, where he created puzzle games on the Academy's Electronica 60. Tetris was born out of Pajitnov's desire to recreate a game from his childhood called Pentominoes. In Pentominoes, the player arranges different shapes to fit into a rectangular box without leaving any spaces. Pajitnov put his own spin on the game by having the pieces fall into rows and downsizing the amount of shapes from 12 pieces to 7, or tetronymos, another geometrically based set of polyominoes. Due to the pieces filling the screen quickly, he had rows disappear as the player completed them, which became a signature element of the game. The name Tetris came from combining the term tetra, meaning 4, and Pajitnov's favorite sport, tennis. Due to the limits of the Electronica 60, and Pajitnov's desire for the game to be more widely available, he approached 16-year-old computer whiz, Vadim Gerasimov, to help him port it to the IBM computer. The game's addictive nature quickly spread throughout the Academy, and eventually to every Moscow institution with a computer, eventually finding its way to Hungarian studio Novotrade, where it would be discovered by a British software company, led by Robert Stein. Unfortunately, due to the Soviet Union's strict copyright monopoly, the rights to Tetris would remain in limbo for several years, with Pajitnov unable to receive any royalties from his creation until 1996. Meanwhile, a convoluted and intense scramble would ensue between 3 different companies to acquire the rights to Tetris from Elorg, the Soviet government's branch dealing with the export of computer software. Due to the original negotiations between Elorg and Robert Stein being murky at best, in terms of what platforms the game was legally allowed to be produced on, liberties would be taken by several different development companies who, unassumingly, produced the game on different platforms, despite the fact that the original deal between Stein and Elorg had yet to be signed. Eventually, the document would be signed. However, the rights would have to be renegotiated, as copies of Tetris were being produced on other platforms aside from the computer, unbeknownst to Elorg, who had assumed that the deal was exclusive to computers. Meanwhile, both Atari and Nintendo would pursue licensing of Tetris for home and handheld consoles after Hank Rogers of Bulletproof Software had approached Nintendo about porting it to the NES and the Game Boy after becoming hooked on the game. After some intense negotiations with Elorg between Rogers, Stein, and Kevin Maxwell of Mirrorsoft, who were looking to secure the game's rights for Atari, a deal would eventually be made between Elorg, Rogers, and Nintendo to secure official licensing of Tetris to the NES and the Game Boy. A legal battle would ensue between Nintendo and Atari, the latter whom produced thousands of cartridges of Tetris for the NES through their subsidiary branch, Tengen. The legal battle would become so heated that Maxwell, who personally knew then Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, tried to persuade him to intervene on the deal between Nintendo and Elorg. The legal fight between Atari and Nintendo would eventually be awarded to Nintendo, however, and Atari was forced to cease all production and destroy their large quantity of Tetris cartridges. Tetris would ultimately become a smash hit for Nintendo on the Game Boy, being bundled with the handheld console at launch. The general appeal of Tetris was a large part of the Game Boy's initial success, and indeed is a huge reason that the game has had such tremendous longevity. Tetris, from its inception, has this incredibly addictive quality to it where, once you pick it up, you can't stop playing it. The simplicity of it makes the game very approachable for both newcomers and even casual or non-gamers. The game is incredibly well paced in that the pieces descend slowly at first, giving the player time to acclimate to the game, and practice making and completing rows by lining up blocks in different combinations. As the game goes on, the pieces fall faster, making the difficulty a gradual increase for the player. Completing a Tetris, or a block of 4 lines, is immensely satisfying, especially with flashy visuals once completed. The ability to hold pieces would be added to later games, adding another element of strategy to Tetris. The infamous Tetris theme, also known as the Russian folk tune Korobaniki, was initially included on the 1988 Macintosh and Apple II GS versions of the game, and would later be rearranged by Hirokazu Tanaka for the Game Boy. Since the Game Boy, the theme has been included in every version of Tetris, and, alongside the Super Mario Bros. Theme, is one of the most recognizable video game themes of all time. Tetris has had a long, enduring legacy as one of the greatest video games of all time. It single-handedly popularized the puzzle game genre, and has been released on virtually every video game console in history, with many different ports, sequels, and spin-offs. Beyond that, it's transcended beyond gaming into the greater popular culture, and is truly one of the most lasting games in history. Perhaps all the craziness surrounding its origins and the legal battle over the rights foreshadowed the tremendous success that the game would have. There is something so basic and simple, yet thoroughly psychologically satisfying about Tetris. Maybe it, in some ways, appeals to our basic human instincts of recognizing patterns and trying to create order out of chaos. Or, it's just a really great effing game. Thanks everybody for watching. It's great to get back to these retro reviews again. There was another bit of a lull there, but I'm happy to be back doing it. Please check out my other videos if you haven't. I'll have them linked at the end here, and if you could, I'd really appreciate a like, and I'd love it if you would check out our friendly neighborhood Discord if you want to get just a little bit deeper into what this channel's all about. Till next time, everybody, peace, or I guess pieces since it's Tetris.